My name is Julian Croft. For the last 15 years, I have lived a life measured by the grain of wood and the changing of the tides. My cottage, nestled in a cove just outside Port Blossom, is more workshop than home. The air inside is a permanent mingling of cedar shavings, turpentine, and the salty breath of the Pacific. At 63, I find my peace in the slow, deliberate work of restoration, coaxing life back into forgotten furniture, feeling the stories held within the worn surfaces of old dressers and fractured chair legs. It is a quiet existence, one I chose after a different, louder life fell away. The day my old life came roaring back began like any other. A soft mist was clinging to the Douglas firs outside my window, and the low moan of a distant foghorn was my only companion. I was in the middle of a delicate repair, inlaying a sliver of mother-of-pearl into the lid of a 19th-century rosewood box. My hands, though wrinkled and scarred, were steady. My focus was absolute. It was in this state of quiet communion with my work that the telephone's shrill ring felt like a violation. I let it ring 3 times, hoping the caller would give up. On the 4th, a nagging premonition took hold. I wiped the wood dust from my hands on my canvas apron and crossed the workshop to the phone mounted on the wall. Julian Croft. Mr. Croft. This is Daniel Pierce. I'm an attorney with Pierce, Gable, and Thorne in Seattle. The voice was sonorous and professional, the kind that bills by the minute and is accustomed to delivering news that alters lives. I'm calling on behalf of Eleonora Sterling. My hand tightened on the receiver. Eleonora, a name I hadn't said aloud in years, though it echoed in the silent chambers of my heart daily. Her full name, Eleonora and Sterling, felt foreign, a title belonging to the titan of industry she had become, not the fiery girl I had once loved. What about her? I asked, my voice betraying a rustiness from disuse. There was a carefully measured pause. Mr. Croft, I'm very sorry to have to tell you this. Mrs. Sterling passed away 2 nights ago. A sudden cardiac event. The rosewood box, the mother-of-pearl, the scent of cedar, it all vanished. The floor beneath my feet seemed to lose its solidity. I leaned against the rough-hewn wall for support, my gaze fixed on a knot in the wood that suddenly looked like a vortex, pulling me down and back through time. 2 nights ago, while I had been sanding the leg of an old Windsor chair, listening to the rain on my metal roof, Eleonora had been gone. Mr. Croft? Are you still there? Yes, I managed, the word a dry leaf in my throat. I'm here. The funeral will be a private family affair, but I'm calling because you were named in her will. The reading is scheduled for this Friday at 2 p.m. at our offices. Your presence is required. Beneficiary. The word was absurd. Impossible. Eleonora and I had severed our lives cleanly, a surgical cut made by lawyers and judges 15 years ago. She had built her empire, Seabrook Ventures, after I was gone. Her world was one of private jets, stock portfolios, and glass and steel towers that scraped the Seattle sky. My world was this 2-room cottage and the quiet dignity of manual labor. What would she possibly have to leave me? A box of old photographs? A final, ironic jab? I don't understand, I said. Eleonora was very specific, Mr. Croft. It is essential that you attend. His tone left no room for argument. He gave me the address, offered his condolences again, and disconnected, leaving me in a silence that was suddenly immense and terrifying. I hung up the phone and walked numbly to the large window that overlooked the water. The mist had begun to burn off, revealing the slate-gray chop of the Puget Sound. I saw not the water, but her face. Not the 61-year-old CEO from the business magazines, but the 22-year-old with fire in her eyes and wild, dark curls that fought against the sea breeze. I met her at Port Blossom's annual arts fair in the summer of 1985. I was a young woodworker, proud of my first public showing, a collection of hand-carved rocking chairs. She wasn't there for the art. She was there with a megaphone and a stack of flyers, leading a protest against a developer planning to clear-cut a swath of old-growth forest to build luxury condos. Her voice, even without the megaphone, was captivating, a clear, ringing bell of righteous fury. She was arguing with the town mayor, dismantling his placid, bureaucratic excuses with a passion that was as beautiful as it was fierce. I forgot all about selling my chairs. I just stood there mesmerized. She was life itself, a force of nature more powerful than the ancient trees she was fighting to protect. You think a tax incentive is worth more than a 200-year-old cedar? She'd challenge him, her hands on her hips. That's not just bad math. It's a failure of the soul. The mayor, flustered and red-faced, retreated. She turned, her eyes scanning the crowd, and for a moment they met mine. I felt a jolt, a connection so immediate and profound it felt like a memory of the future. After the crowd dispersed, I walked over to her. "I've never seen anyone take on Mayor Davies like that," I said, my voice sounding impossibly shy. She offered a brilliant, tired smile. "So I had to. He thinks progress is a synonym for pavement." She looked at my chairs, running a hand over the smooth, curved arm of one. "This is beautiful. You have a good heart in your hands." "Julian Croft," I said, extending a hand still dusty with sawdust. "Eleonora," she replied, her grip firm and warm. "Just Eleonora." We spent the rest of the day talking. She told me of her dreams, not of wealth then, but of justice, of building a better world. I told her of my love for the wood, for the honesty of a well-made thing. We were from different worlds, she the whirlwind, I the rooted tree, but we found our center in each other. We married a year later, on the same bluff she had fought to save. She wore a simple white dress and a crown of wildflowers. Our first home was a small rental, not much bigger than the cottage I live in now. She started a small consulting firm from our spare bedroom, helping local businesses with sustainable practices. I built us a dining table from a fallen maple tree, and it became the heart of our home. It was there we celebrated the birth of our son, Adrian, a perfect, beautiful boy who had my quiet nature and his mother's bright, curious eyes. For a time, it was idyllic, but the world Eleonora wanted to change began to change her instead. Her small firm landed a big client, then another. The talk of sustainability was replaced by talk of scalability. The passion for justice slowly morphed into a hunger for influence. We moved from our small rental to a large, modern house in the hills overlooking the Sound, a place with more glass than walls and a kitchen so sterile it felt like a laboratory. Adrian grew up in that new world. When he was 8, I tried to teach him how to carve a small bird from a block of pine. He was patient for a while, but Eleanor came in with a new tablet computer. "This is the future, Julian," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "He needs to be fluent in the language of tomorrow, not yesterday." I watched as my son's fascination with the wooden bird was eclipsed by the glowing screen. It was the first time I felt like a foreigner in my own family. The distance grew, imperceptibly at first, then with the undeniable force of a continental drift. Our maple dining table was replaced by a 12-foot slab of Italian marble that reflected our strained faces during silent dinners. Eleonora's work became her life. She was brilliant, a visionary. Seabrook Ventures grew into a financial behemoth. She was celebrated, admired, a titan of the Seattle business scene. I tried to keep up. I attended the fundraisers, the corporate galas, the parties filled with people who discussed market caps and acquisitions. I would stand in my best suit, a glass of expensive champagne in my hand, feeling like an imposter. Eleonora would introduce me with a new, subtle inflection in her voice. "This is my husband, Julian. He's a craftsman." It wasn't an apology, not quite, but it was an explanation, a way of contextualizing the quiet, simple man who didn't fit in her gleaming, complex world. Adrian, my sweet, quiet boy, adapted all too well. He absorbed his mother's values, as if by osmosis. He learned to value success above all else. He became sharp, ambitious, and dismissive of the simple things I tried to share with him. A walk in the woods, a day spent fishing, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. "Dad doesn't get it," became his teenage mantra, a phrase that always came with a sigh of pity. The final break came on my 50th birthday. I had wanted a simple barbecue in our backyard with a few old friends. Eleonora, in a gesture she believed was loving, had arranged a surprise party. It was a catered affair at a downtown art gallery, with a guest list populated by her business associates and their families. It was a networking event disguised as a celebration. Standing amidst the clinking glasses and talk of stock options, I felt a profound and suffocating loneliness. Later that night, I told her, "I don't belong in your world anymore, Eleonora. I don't think I ever did." "Don't be so dramatic, Julian," she said, distracted, checking stock tickers on her phone. "This isn't a life," I said, the words I'd held back for years finally spilling out. "It's a performance. We're a corporation, not a family." She finally looked up, her eyes cold with a weariness I'd never seen before. "Maybe this corporation is simply ready for a restructuring," she said. The divorce was efficient and bloodless. She was generous in her way. I was given the means to live comfortably, to set up my own workshop. She got the empire, the house, and, most painfully, she got Adrian. His loyalty to her was absolute. "You held her back, Dad," he told me in our last conversation, standing in the marble foyer of the house I was leaving forever. He was 18, about to head to a prestigious business school, a younger, male version of his mother. "You were an anchor, and she was a ship built for the open sea. I'm not going to make that mistake." And so, for 15 years, I had lived with that judgment. The anchor, the man who wasn't enough. I had built a life of quiet solitude, finding solace in my work, convincing myself that it was enough. Now, standing in my window, the news of her death settled into my bones like the damp coastal chill. She was gone. The whirlwind had ceased. And for reasons I could not begin to fathom, she had left my name in her will. I had to go to Seattle. I had to face the world I had fled, and the son who saw me as nothing more than a ghost from a past his mother had brilliantly overcome. The drive to Seattle on Friday was a journey through a past I had tried to wall off. The Tulane coastal highway gradually widened into a multi-lane freeway, the quiet landscape of firs and sea giving way to the steel and glass canyons of the city. I had parked my old, reliable pickup truck in a public garage that charged more per hour than I sometimes spent on food in a day. Dressed in my only suit, a dark gray I hadn't worn since my own mother's funeral, I felt like a weathered barn owl in a flock of sleek, predatory falcons. The offices of Pierce, Gable, and Thorne occupied the top 3 floors of skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. The lobby was a symphony of marble, brushed steel, and hushed efficiency. A receptionist with a headset and a serene smile directed me to the 52nd floor. The elevator ascended with a silent, stomach-lurching speed. Stepping out, I was met with a panoramic view of the city, Elliott Bay, and the distant snow-capped Olympic Mountains. It was a view that screamed power and success, Eleanora's view. Daniel Pierce, the lawyer from the phone, met me at the reception desk. He was a tall, silver-haired man with a kind but guarded expression. He led me down a wide hallway to a large conference room. And there he was. Adrian stood by the window, his back to me, staring out at the view as if he owned it. At 33, he was the man Eleonora had groomed him to be. He wore a perfectly tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than my truck. His posture was one of easy command, his phone held loosely in one hand. He had Eleonora's sharp intelligence in his eyes, but it was hardened, edged with a restless ambition she had only developed later in life. He heard us enter and turned. His eyes, so like his mother's, widened in momentary shock, then narrowed into slits of pure disdain. "Dad!" The word was an accusation, not a greeting. "What in God's name are you doing here?" "Hello, Adrian," I said, my voice steady. "Mr. Pierce requested my presence." Adrian's gaze shot to the lawyer. "Daniel, you didn't tell me he was coming. This is a private matter. Your mother's will specifically stipulates that both of you must be present for the reading," Daniel said calmly, gesturing for us to take seats at the enormous mahogany conference table. Adrian let out a short, incredulous laugh. A formality, I assume. Some leftover clause from a time when he was relevant. He sat down directly across from me, his expression a mask of contemptuous impatience. "Let's get this over with. I have a board meeting at 4. I sat in the plush leather chair, feeling small and out of place. The 15 years of silence between my son and me had calcified into a wall of resentment. I saw no trace of the boy I had taught to ride a bike, only a stranger forged in the crucible of his mother's ambition. Daniel Pierce sat at the head of the table and opened a handsome leather portfolio. He put on a pair of reading glasses, and the room fell silent, save for the distant hum of the city below. "This," he began, his voice filling the room, "is the last will and testament of Eleonora and Sterling, executed on May 12th of this year. 3 months ago, I thought. She knew. She must have known she was unwell. The thought sent a fresh pang of grief through me. I'll dispense with the legal formalities and proceed to the bequests," Daniel said, looking over his glasses first at Adrian, then at me. "To my beloved son, Adrian Julian Croft," he read, and I flinched, hearing my name attached to his. I'd forgotten she'd insisted on it. I bequeath my condominium at the Olympian Tower in Seattle, with all its contents. I further bequeath the sum of $1 million, to be transferred to him free of all taxes. A smug, knowing smile touched Adrian's lips. He leaned back in his chair, a king receiving his expected tribute. The condo was a multi-million-dollar property. $1 million in cash was a handsome gift. It was a generous, but not an empire-defining, inheritance. I saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. He was waiting for the main event, the company. "And that's it?" Adrian asked, his smile tightening. "What about Seabrook? The company is worth." "If you will allow me to continue," Daniel said, his tone firm. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the next page. He paused for a fraction of a second, a moment of stillness, so profound it felt like the world holding its breath. Then he looked directly at me. His next words were not shouted. They were not dramatic. They were spoken in the same measured, professional tone as all the others, and yet they landed with the force of a tectonic shift, rearranging the entire landscape of my life. "To my former husband, Julian Croft," Daniel Pierce read, "in recognition of a debt that can never be truly repaid, I bequeath the remainder of my entire estate." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air from the room. I stared at Daniel, certain I had misheard, that my mind, addled by grief and stress, had conjured a fantasy. I beg your pardon," I stammered. Adrian's smug smile had vanished, replaced by a look of stark, utter disbelief. "What did you just say?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. Daniel continued, his voice unwavering, as if he were merely reading a weather report. "This includes all my shares and controlling interest, 60%, in Seabrook Ventures and its subsidiary holdings. My complete investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $52 million, and all other real and intellectual property. The will also names Julian Croft as the new chairman of the board for Seabrook Ventures, effective immediately." The numbers were meaningless. $52 million. It was an abstraction, a string of zeros. But chairman of the board, that was real. That was absurd. That was a joke of cosmic proportions. Then the silence broke. It was Adrian. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the polished floor. His face was a terrifying kaleidoscope of color, from deathly pale to blotchy red. "No!" The word was a primal scream of raw fury that seemed to shake the very glass of the skyscraper. "No, that is not possible. There's a mistake. Read again." "There is no mistake, Adrian," Daniel said calmly, though he had leaned back slightly, as if bracing for a physical assault. "A mistake? This is fraud. It's criminal." Adrian's eyes, wild and unhinged, swiveled to me. I was still frozen in my chair, trying to make my lungs work. "You!" he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger across the table. "What did you do to her? How did you poison her against me? You crawled out from under your rock and manipulated a sick old woman." "I haven't spoken to your mother in 15 years, Adrian," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I didn't even know she was sick." "Liar!" He slammed his fist on the mahogany table, making the crystal water glasses jump. "She built this empire. I helped her. I was her right hand, her successor. She would never, ever give it to you, the man who broke her heart, the man who abandoned us. I didn't abandon you, son. Our marriage, Don't you call me son, he roared, his voice cracking with a pain that was suddenly more visible than his rage. You have no right. You were a footnote in her life, a chapter she was embarrassed to have written. All these years, I've worked, I've sacrificed, I've become everything she wanted me to be. And for what? For her to give it all to a carpenter? The word was meant as the ultimate insult, the final proof of my insignificance. But in that moment, hearing it from his lips, it felt like a badge of honor. I was a carpenter. I made things. I restored things. I understood the value of what was real and solid. Adrian, please, Daniel interjected, his professional calm finally fraying. Your mother was of perfectly sound mind. She had 2 separate psychiatric evaluations in the months leading up to this to ensure the will would be unassailable. Then why? Adrian's rage collapsed into a desperate, pleading sob. He sank back in his chair, burying his face in his hands. Why would she do this to me? The raw agony in that question pierced through my own shock. For a fleeting moment, he wasn't the arrogant CEO, but the little boy who had lost his mother and, in the same breath, the entire world he thought he was owed. Daniel Pierce reached into his portfolio and pulled out a simple, cream-colored envelope. On the front, in elegant, familiar script, was a single word: Julian. She knew this would be difficult to understand, Daniel said softly. She left a letter. She asked that I read it aloud to both of you. Adrian looked up, his face streaked with tears and fury. A letter? She explains her betrayal in a letter. Perhaps, Daniel said, opening the seal. She explains her love. He unfolded the pages and began to read. And in the sterile conference room, 52 floors above the city, Eleonora's voice filled the space one last time. Daniel's voice softened as he began to read, taking on a different cadence, as if he were channeling Eleonora herself. My dearest Julian, the letter began. If you are hearing this, it means my time is done. I imagine you are sitting there in your suit, which I'm sure you hate, looking completely bewildered. You always had a look for when I'd done something audacious, a mixture of shock and a grudging, hidden smile. I hope you're at least a little bit smiling now. Despite the tears blurring my vision, a small, sad smile did find my lips. She knew me. Even after all this time, she still knew me. I know this is a shock, my love. I know you think this is a mistake. But the biggest mistake I ever made was letting you walk away. I built an empire, Julian. I conquered a world you never wanted. I won every battle, except the only one that ever mattered, the one for our family. Adrian made a choked sound, a gasp of pain or protest, but he didn't speak. He stared at the letter in Daniel's hands as if it were a serpent. I spent years telling myself a story. Eleonora's words continued to flow through Daniel. A story where I was the hero, the visionary, held back by a man who didn't share my dreams. It was a good story. It got me through a lot of lonely nights in hotel rooms across the world. But it wasn't the true story. The truth is, you weren't holding me back. You were trying to hold me. You were my anchor, yes, but not in the way Adrian thinks. An anchor isn't meant to stop a ship's journey. It's meant to hold it steady in a storm, to keep it from being dashed against the rocks. I pulled up my anchor because I thought it was slowing me down, and I've been drifting in a storm ever since. The room was utterly still. I could feel the truth of her words resonating in my soul, healing cracks I didn't even know were still there. The shame I had carried for 15 years, the shame of being the simple man, the anchor, began to dissolve. And Adrian, the letter turned to him. My beautiful, brilliant son, I know you are hurt and angry. I know you feel betrayed, but I'm giving you the greatest gift I can, a life you must build for yourself. I gave you every advantage, every tool for success. But in doing so, I rob you of the one thing you needed most, the struggle. You learned the price of everything, but I failed to teach you the value of anything. Your father, the man you have dismissed for half your life, understands value better than anyone I have ever known. He knows the value of quiet integrity, of a promise kept, of a day's honest work. I have given him the company, Julian, because he will know what to do with it. He will see it not as a monument to me, but as a responsibility to its people. He will make it better, kinder, He won't run it from a place of fear or ego, but from a place of character. I trust him. The money I have left you, son, is more than enough to start your own journey. Find your own passion. Build something that is yours, not an inheritance. Learn to be a man your father can be proud of. And please, learn to forgive him. His only crime was loving a woman who, for a time, loved success more than she loved him. The letter ended with a final, simple line addressed to me. Go build something beautiful, my love. You always were the best at that. All my love, always, Eleonora. When Daniel finished, he folded the pages and slid them back into the envelope. He pushed it gently across the table toward me. My hand trembled as I took it. It was the most valuable thing I now owned. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was heavy with unshed tears, with the weight of a life's final, profound truth. Adrian sat motionless for a long time, staring at nothing. His face was a wreck of emotions. The anger was gone, replaced by a hollow, lost expression. The world he had built his identity upon had been dismantled in the space of a 10-minute letter. He wasn't the heir apparent. He was just a man with $1 million and a mother who believed he had failed a fundamental test of character. Finally, he stood up, his movements stiff and uncertain. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Daniel. He walked to the door, a stranger in his own life. Adrian, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn. The letter. She was wrong about one thing, I said. I was always proud of you. I'm still. He flinched, as if the words had physically struck him. For a moment, I thought he might turn, that this might be the beginning of something new. But he only shook his head slightly, a gesture of denial or despair, and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I was left in the quiet, cavernous room, with a letter in my hand and an empire at my feet. The view from the 52nd floor was no longer intimidating. It was just a city filled with people with lives. It was a responsibility. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how to be a chairman of the board. I will probably sell the condo and the fancy cars and all the trappings of a life I don't want. But I will not sell the company. Eleonora trusted me with it. She trusted me to infuse it with the values she had misplaced and found again only at the end. Perhaps one day, Adrian will find his way. Perhaps he will build something of his own, something that brings him the peace that wealth never could. I hope so. He is, after all, my son. For now, I have work to do, not with wood and varnish, but with people and balance sheets. It's a new kind of restoration project, the biggest of my life. I will learn. I will do my best to honor her last wish, to build something beautiful. It is, as she said, what I was always best at. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel not like an anchor, but like a ship that has finally been given its true and steady course.